Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ronline Report. Got an amazing guest today. Very, very lucky to have him. If you've ever watched YouTube, you've probably seen at least one of this man's videos. He is the man behind Valuetainment channel, which has, wow, almost 2 million subscribers, over 164 million views. His Instagram, Patrick Bet David, 2.1 million followers. Also the CEO or owner of PHP Agency, insurance sales and marketing distribution company with 12,000 agents, which was founded during that horrific real estate-based recession about 10, 11 years ago. Best-selling author, international speaker. Please welcome the most viewed host on YouTube, Patrick Bet David. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, I want to run down some of these big names. Some of the people you've interviewed, it's just wow. Because, I do my fair share of interviews, but I don't get names like this. Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, a couple times, I believe. Kevin Hart, Magic Johnson, Mark Cuban, Ric Flair, for all you wrestling fans. Sammy the Bull Gravano, Jordan Peterson, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. Just to give a small sample, you have over 1,000 interviews on your channel at this point. So I guess my first question is, you had this successful insurance company that certainly kept you busy enough. How did you get the idea to transition into doing interviews and becoming a YouTube channel?
It's funny. I've always been curious about people. I've always been curious about everyone's story. It didn't matter whether I was a kid talking to people. I wanted to know, how did you get to where you're at? Even when you and I started talking pre-camera being on, I asked you, what's your background? And you told me you're in Boston, but you're not a professional sports fan. You live 10 miles away. And how you got into bodybuilding, why you got into bodybuilding, the two reasons why people get into bodybuilding. That stuff to me is it's fascinating. So fast forward, in high school, I was more interested in getting to know my teachers and stories and coaches and things like that than I was actually interested in the topic we were studying. And then I go into the military, I get out, and next thing you know, I get into bodybuilding, and I'm competing myself in the Army at some point. But this is back in 1998 is when I was doing some Army competitions. And then I started working at Bally's. When I worked at Bally Total Fitness back in the days when it was Bally Total Fitness, I think most of them have been bought by LA Fitness. I started working at Bally's, and when I'm selling memberships, I was the guy that would sit there and say, tell me about your story. Why'd you come to the gym today? Have you looked at other gyms? What are you interested in? You trying to tone up? You trying to develop muscle? You trying to cut down? You trying to increase energy? What is it? That whole process of getting to know people and actually being interested in them helped me be the Rookie of the Month. Then we won Triple Crown. And then I left Bally's. I went to Morgan Stanley Dean Witter a day before 9/11, became an advisor.
Wow.
Been in the industry since then. And, so that's that part. Now, at one point, I was producing a lot of content that's private. So it's not public. It was specific for our company and the organization we had. So I'd bring speakers and I would interview them. I would always sit down and interview them. But there was no camera. It was purely for my small group of people. And then one day when we started the YouTube channel, I said, let's try to create some content. And we did. And it was specific to entrepreneurs. And then I started doing some interviews. And I said, hey, one of the things we got to do is we shut down the channel for 90 days. A few years ago, we shut it down. I said, if we're going to do this again, I'm not doing this to have 300,000-400,000 subscribers. If we're going to do this and I'm going to put a few million into it, I'm doing this because we're going to go, 10 million subs, build a media company. We're going to do something with this. So we gathered a team, we sat down, we had a conversation, we changed the channel from Patrick Bet David to Valuetainment, and then we started doing interviews, and it grew to what it is today. So it's been a wild ride. When we first started, I didn't think we were going to interview Sammy the Bull Gravano and some of these names that we're doing today, but it's definitely been a wild ride.
Yeah. So, I'm looking at these names, and these are people, as an interviewer, there have been times when I've been intimidated, like this person, just the thought of speaking to someone at that level who's accomplished what they are and has this level of fame or fortune, whatever. Were you ever intimidated in the beginning or even now? Are there some people that you get a little nervous before you speak to them?
I'll give you a story. Credit goes to my dad. One time, I'm living in Germany, and in Germany, this is when David Hasselhoff is God. I mean, if you've been to Europe, David Hasselhoff is more famous than Michael Jackson. It's amazing how much these guys love David Hasselhoff. So I'm in Germany, it's 1990, and you're watching him run with, all the other actors and Pamela Anderson and Billy War, all these actors and actresses. Then I come to the States. My parents were divorced, so it was the weekend where my dad had me. He picks me up We go to Sherman Oaks. Back in the days, there was a mall. They shut it down. They rebuilt it.
The Galleria. I remember.
You remember that one? Yes.
I used to live out there.
I think it's by that golf, the miniature golf thing they had off of the Sepulveda. I think. I don't know what street it was.
Yep.
So we go to this mall, and we go upstairs to Burger King. I order my Whopper. By the way, later on, I end up working at Burger King. But I'm 12, 13 years old. I order my Whopper. Then all of a sudden, I look up, and I'm like, Dad, look who it is. He says, who is it? I said, it's David Hasselhoff. I got to go introduce myself. So I'm getting nervous, this 12, 13-year-old kid who just left Germany, refugee camp. I'm in America. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe David Hasselhoff is sitting 20 feet away from me. And I'm looking at him, I start getting nervous. And my dad said the magical words to me. He says, Patrick, you don't need to go to him. He needs to come to you. I says, what do you mean? He says, he needs to come find out who you are. You don't need to go find out who he is. You don't need his autograph. He needs your autograph. Huh. And by the way, my dad is a very modest man who is the hardest working human being I've ever met in my life. I've never seen anybody work harder than him. And he's so principle based. So he kind of instilled that saying, you don't have to be intimidated by anybody. My dad would always say some weird things. He would say, never win a fight with your hands, always win fights with your words. If you're going to do it with the results. And so when that happened, that kind of stuck with me. So as a kid, I'm growing up, I'm like, oh my gosh, look who it is. And it will always go back, what my dad says, he needs to come to you. Hey, how are you? So it kind of instilled that idea of meeting him. But if you're asking a question on who was the most intimidating person I sat down with, purely because of the level of controversy, it would probably be Gloria Allred. I mean, just sitting down with her, she was just so anti, man and all this stuff that she was doing, and $250 million of sexual harassment lawsuits. Yeah. And her demeanor from the moment you walk in, you feel it. But I mean, I've sat down with President Bush. I've sat down with a lot of these guys. And at the end of the day, when you're sitting down with them and knowing how hard they work to get to where they're at, and you're paying the price yourself in a complete different industry, there's a certain level of commonality. I feel like sometimes when you're not, when you actually take a time out and you say, look, in my own field, I'm giving everything I got. This is another human being that I'm talking to. There's nothing wrong with that. You go and talk to them, right? You'll hear a lot of stories of when Bill Clinton first met JFK, or when Trump first met Rockefeller, or Trump first met Ronald Reagan. They asked Ronald Reagan, what was it like when you first met Trump? Reagan said, I felt like I was meeting the president because of Trump's, swagger.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Kennedy and Clinton, when they met, it's a similar type of a story, because to them, it's like, one day I'm going to be the president. So when you have that kind of a vision, it put things into perspective. But it's definitely inspiring to meet all these guys.
Yeah, JFK met Bill Clinton?
Yeah, Bill Clinton.
Wow.
There's a very famous picture. If you look it up, it's a very good picture if you look it up. It's Bill Clinton shaking JFK's hands. And Bill Clinton is a young guy. It's a classic picture. You ought to actually put it up on the video if you're able to.
Yeah, I'll find that.
It's a neat picture.
Yeah. I'm curious, you have a really cool studio. Where is it? Is that out there in California that you do those interviews with the Incredible Hulk and all that stuff?
Yeah, so this is just to kind of give you an idea. The office I'm in, my office is no longer an office. I don't know if you can see it. Let me pull this around a little bit. My office has got the Hulk, the painting, all of that. So the entire office here is a studio. Yeah. Behind me is the bookshelf that says read. I don't know if you can see that. I spend probably a little less than $1 million to build a studio in-house here, the lighting, all of it. And we put some time into it. All the editors are internal. We don't send them out. We put it all in here. So, once we made the decision that we're going to play ball, it was a 90-day decision, which was like, I'm not doing this anymore. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it. It's a lot of work. This is not something that we got to be very consistent with this thing. But once we said in, I said, let's go in. So,
here's a good question. Anybody that you wish you could have interviewed, but they've now passed away and you'll never get the chance?
Yeah, I mean, it's most of those guys on that painting. I'd love to.
Abraham Lincoln, I saw.
Yeah, I would have loved to interview Tupac. I would have loved to interview the Shah of Iran, Ayrton Senna, MLK, Milton Friedman, Abe, JFK. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of people I'd love to interview that are no longer with us, just to kind of think. Some of them are older people that are just not. I'd love to talk to Alexander. I just would love to feel Alexander the Great's spirit. I love to sit in front of him and look at him in the eyes to see how piercing his eyes are. Like, I'm curious to know how he looks at you. Like, do you feel the fire in this guy's belly? I would have loved to met that guy at 21 years old to see how he was. So some of those guys, yes, I would have loved to meet some of those guys.
So, I was aware of who you were, but I really became more aware of who you are when you started interviewing people from my world. You've had all the top guys on recently: Phil Heath, Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, most recently Brandon Curry, all great champions. What made you start interviewing bodybuilding champions? Because as much as I love the sport, I know that in the mainstream world, a lot of people aren't even aware of who these people are. So what drew you to them?
So it's interesting you say that. These are people I admire a lot, because to do what they do, I mean, you know this, you're in the world, you got to put your body through a lot of pain and nights of going to sleep being sore and walking funny with the legs. And most people just look at them and they say, well, if I did steroids and growth hormone and PED, I would have looked like you. And they're clueless. They have no idea what they're talking about. It always takes me back to the message of a lady once told Arnold, I would never want my husband to look like you. And he said, don't worry, he never will. Those kinds of things. And then the other side to me is, I feel anything I look at, Ron, everything I look at from my lens, I look at how it can improve. I can't help myself. I look at bodybuilding where I ask you a question. I said, yeah, where are you from? Boston. I said, are you a Patriots fan? You says, I don't follow sports.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? You don't have to follow their sport, but all of them follow your sport. 100% of people who do any kind of sports have to understand bodybuilding, whether they buy Men's Fitness, whether they buy Flex Magazine, Muscular Development, whether it was Muscle Media back in the days or Muscle Mag or whatever you call it. They all have to find out what's going on with health. Whether they go to and buy Lululemon clothes, or do yoga, or they go into some of these other CrossFit places that's coming up, they're trying to figure out a way how to get a neck, or how to get the shoulders, or how to get the arms, or how to get the chisel, or how to get the abs. They come into your world. I got into insurance, and when I first got into insurance, I was debating between insurance and real estate. So watch this. This is actually an interesting story because it has a lot to do with bodybuilding and the brand. So what's more sexy? Do you want to take people into a house and say, imagine Mary and John, one day you walk into this house and this is the kitchen and your kids are running around and you have the TV there and your water on the fountain at the back and the pool and the windows are open. So you're hearing that and you're listening to music with the speakers we have up here for $680,000. You're in this cul-de-sac, good school. And Mary and John are like, oh my gosh, I'd love to live here. It's a dream, it's a fun thing. You're selling them a dream, right? Okay. Now think about insurance. Okay. Hey, John, Mary, imagine the day John dies. Mary, what are you going to do? You tell me what's exciting about the industry I chose to get a part of, right? Yeah. Think about that. Like, who would want to talk about dying? That's my business. My business is insurance, and that's what I do all day. And I never talk about it because that's a different story when I'm running my content. What does this have to do with bodybuilding? Here's what it has to do with bodybuilding. I looked at the insurance industry and I saw the people that were there at the top. The average agent is a 59-year-old white male and the average CEO is in their 60s. So I'm sitting and looking at the industry and saying, everybody wears Brooks Brothers. They all wear Kohan. They're all old school. They're afraid of people with tattoos. They're afraid of the younger people coming up. They think anybody with a tattoo is a gangster. They think anybody, oh my gosh, I have to go to the country club type of selling. It's so much in a box. Like today I had a meeting with Goldman Sachs in the morning that I was invited to with their chief investment officer. And yesterday I'm at Rancho Mirage in Palm Desert at the Ritz. And I'm sitting there talking to this, their chief investment officer, who is very well known in the marketplace. These are the guys from New York. These are people that everybody follows. But you're going in there. It's a different energy. Everybody looks the same, right? So I looked at the insurance industry and I said, they don't know how to tell the story on how to connect with millennials and Gen X's. I'm going to learn how to tell this story differently. And I started telling the story differently. We grew it from 66 agents to 13,000 agents. Our convention at Mirage, we had Kobe Bryant and President Bush there. It shook up the industry. They said, wait a minute, what the heck are these guys doing? And we're 54% of our company is Latino, 51% is women. The average agent is 33 years old. Makes no sense to them. So now let's set that part aside. Let's look at bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is got a few different things that they're uncomfortable with and they're worried about talking about. Like, you know, when they say 1990 or 1991, I think was Sean Ray was the first person that failed a test, a drug test. I don't know what the thing was. He failed a drug test. Like, oh my gosh, he failed a drug test. And then all these Mr. Olympia people did an interview with Tom Platz, if you remember, where their faces was blurry and you could hear the voice was also blurry, but everybody knew who was. I mean, how many people look like Ronnie? How many people look like, you know, Cormier or some of these guys? It's not like it doesn't take a dummy to figure it out, but people were worried about talking about what they put into their bodies. I think there's a big opportunity today. Here's why. Joe Rogan changed the game when he started talking about marijuana and saying, why are we so worried about marijuana? Okay. I'm not a weed guy. I don't smoke weed. I can count how many times I've done it in my 20s. I'm just not somebody that likes to put a lot of drugs. I like to be in control, and I don't like anything that controls me. But if I did, it's my choice. It's my body. I choose to do that. It's nobody else's business. If I want to hurt myself, this is my body. When I'm working in the military, I get it. The government owns me, but I'm no longer in the military. So Patrick Bet-David owns this body. I have the choice what to do with this body. Fine. Bodybuilders do a lot of things that professional athletes do. You know, the other day, Conor McGregor talked about the fact that LeBron James spends $1.5 million on his body. He says, if LeBron James spends $1.5 million on his body and mind, I have to do the same thing. So he went and hired Tony Robbins, paid him a few $100,000 a year to mentor him. He went and hired the right nutritionists. He went and hired the right trainers to get himself. He went and spent $1 million on his body to get it to the next level. What does $1 million on his body really mean? Do we know what that means? Have we unpacked it to see what level of supplements? Does he have some kind of a Chad Nichols in his life? We don't know that. We don't know these types of stories. So when I looked at bodybuilding and Mr. Olympia, I told myself, from MGM, Mr. Olympias, with 10,000 people to 3,000 people, what's happened over the years? Storytelling can improve. Money can improve. The bodybuilders who have won need to be shown that they're going to be taken care of. You don't have that many people to take care of. You need to show loyalty to the people that put their bodies through a lot and win. And figure out ways that if I'm willing to go above and beyond, give me an out into Hollywood, get me agents, get me into WME, APA, get me an agent from, you know, William Morris, somebody that represents me that can maybe get me into some kind of flicks and commercials and all this other stuff. Then get me some contracts with an Under Armour or some of these lines and Nike and some of these things where now I can make money, where I'm now proud. Now young 16-year-olds are saying, I want to be like him because he just did a commercial and he's one of Under Armour's athletes. He's one of them. So I purely saw bodybuilding as an opportunity. And I said, let's start talking about it. And it led to what it is today.
Yeah, you know, the one thing, you know, because I interview that's my day job. I interview these people every day. And I sort of cringe when you would have the guts to ask about PED use because it is a taboo subject. You know, do you have any reservations about asking those questions? And do you expect honest answers from these guys?
Listen, we got honest answers from Ronnie Coleman. I mean, to the most part, I don't know if you watched the whole thing when he said, yeah, we do. I mean, he says, I didn't do as much as the other guys were doing, or I didn't do any more than other guys were doing, but Ronnie talked. Yeah. And if Ronnie's Michael Jordan and he talked, guess what? Everybody else can talk. It's not like the guy who talked is not somebody who's not won. He's won not once, but 8 times, him and Lee Haney. And he won at a time where he was going against some scary bodies. I mean, he's not just going up against lightweights. He went up against Ray, Flex, El Sorbati. I mean, you know, there's so many names. I don't want to miss them because there's so many names to go through. So he won against Cutler. Cutler's a legit legendary type of a bodybuilder himself. So he won, and he's willing to talk about it. Then you got a little bit of the current one that spoke. Brandon Curry was willing to speak about it when he went to Kuwait, and we talked about that a little bit. And then Dorian Yates just talks about it whether you ask him or not. He's just going to talk about it because to him, he really doesn't care. So I think the sport needs to have a meeting and needs to kind of work with making it not seem like it's a big deal to do certain things because it's your body. It's a libertarian message. And if bodybuilding needs to take the next step to become mainstream, they have to start presenting it from certain values and principles and philosophies that are aligned with what America was founded on, which is freedom of speech, freedom of this, all this stuff that we had. At one point, alcohol was illegal, so they made it legal. Alcohol sucks for you. Millions of people die from alcohol. Cigarettes are legal. So many people have died from cigarettes. One person's died from marijuana, and a lot of people have died from steroids and growth hormone. But nowadays, when you read certain books, The Ageless Man and some of the newer books, people are starting to realize that Hey, what is the story with TRT? You know, what is the story with some of these Samoralin or whatever people are taking? Why are doctors recommending it? Why is a Sly on it regularly? Just to be full transparency, I'm not on any TRT. I'm not on creatine. I'm not on supplements. I'm not on anything. But when somebody asks me and says, hey, man, me and my wife, you know what I'm saying? I used to be able to get it up and we'd have sex, but I don't have morning erections. And I would say, listen, go talk to a doctor. It's your agent. You're 53 years old. What do you want to do about it? It's not like, you know, what goes up is going to stay up forever. Sometimes you need some enhancements. But the moral of the story is if we take it from an argument like this and we have the tough conversations, then somebody could say, okay, he's right. If you want to put that on your body, guess what? Go ahead. If you want to do that to your body, go ahead. There's a risk to it. I know. I'm drinking alcohol. There's risk to alcohol. I'm smoking cigarettes. There's risk to it. I'm doing this. There's risk to it. What's the difference? It's my body. I don't think that story is being told. And I think it's a big price that they're not telling that story, because here's what I think is going to happen, Ron. When they start talking about it, criticism is going to go here, hardcore. And it'll last about 12 to 18 months. Then all of a sudden people are going to say, you know what? Okay. I mean, I can't tell you how many in the history of America topics we talked about that were super critical, whether it's civil, women voting, whether it's gay, whether it's marijuana, whether it's all this stuff. You talk about it, then people have the debate all over, and you're hoping media and news and ESPN and all these guys debate it. And then they say, you want to hurt your body? Go ahead, no problem, do it, but it's on you. Then it becomes an art. Then it's accepted. Then not everybody's sitting in the room saying, oh, I don't do anything. I just take creatine and protein and I train very hard. And everybody knows you're full of shit. It's just, you got to tell the story. So I'm just saying we got to tell the story in a better way. And I think some of the guys that don't want to tell the truth about what they're doing, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the organization's fault. I don't put it on the bodybuilders. I put it on the organization that wants to always do the hush, hush, let's not talk about it. Let's kind of keep it safe. And it hurts the talent, because I think there's a lot we can do with the talent.
Well, there's two things. There's two sides to that. One is the legality. You know, if a bodybuilder tells you everything he used was prescribed by a doctor, that doctor would lose his license. I'll tell you right now. They can prescribe, legally, they can prescribe certain things. They cannot prescribe the full gamut of what is used for bodybuilding competition, especially at the highest levels. So legality, they're hesitant to talk about it because technically they're breaking the law. You know, we all break the law every day if you drive 2 miles over the speed limit and so forth. But the other thing is this whole stigma of cheating, which I can understand why you would consider it cheating at the amateur level, say the Olympics, but pro football, pro basketball, pro bodybuilding, why do you think, or do you think there'll ever come a day where we say, you know what, it's just another training aid, just like these guys have nutritionists and they have all the, you know, millions and millions of dollars of high-tech training equipment and recovery and all these things. So why does steroids still have this stigma that that's everything else is okay, but steroids are cheating? And we pretend that these athletes aren't doing it. We pretend we're watching NFL games every Sunday and these guys aren't using steroids. And we watch baseball and pretend these guys aren't using steroids. But, you know, unfortunately, bodybuilders can't escape that because we wear it on our bodies. You see a 275-pound man with 2% body fat, 24-inch arms. There's no way a human being can look like that without drugs. You know.
So I'll give you my feedback on that. I'll give you my rebuttal on that. Fair enough. Yes. And this is good because these are exactly the conversations that we need to be having. Like, it needs to be these conversations. So let's talk about the fact that any doctor that prescribed what some of these bodybuilders say prescribe is illegal, right? Okay, fine. Number one, hire a lobbyist and let's start talking about it. Start talking about the fact that here's the stats on what alcohol has done. And there is nobody that has a liquor store gets arrested if they sold you 3 cases of Corona with 12 bottles in each one, and I drink 50. That's not the liquor store's fault. Right. That's the guy that took it. Nobody told you to drink 50 beers in one night. No one told you to drop 2 Jim Beams in a night. That's on you. I can't blame. So again, that argument has to be made by an attorney. I'm not an attorney, but if I was, I would go from that angle. So then the next thing about the cheating part, right? We weren't on our sleeves. I think the other part that this is going to be a little bit controversial and maybe it initially may not make a lot of sense, but I think it needs to be talked about. I think we glorify too big of a size and it's not attractive. So today I have Kenya here, my executive assistant. I got a few people here and I got girls around me here at the office and we're looking at a couple bodybuilders, okay? Because I knew I was doing this. I'm looking at a couple bodybuilders. we go through it. She says, oh, that's so nasty. I said, okay. So I said, how about this? No. And some of these bodybuilders are the 350 pound, 300 pound bodybuilders. Oh, that's so nasty. And that's so this. And, you know, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And then she looks at Arnold and she says, oh, that looks so good.
Mm.
And then she goes, wow, that looks great. And these are Mr. Olympia bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Samir Bannout, oh, he looks so great. And even a Sean Ray, he looks good. He looks great. So I think the other side is how a Kim Kardashian today is seen sexy, which if you go back a couple decades ago, the Calvin Klein models were 80-pound models, and that was sexy because that's how fashion sold us that an attractive, sexy woman is 95 pounds, and all these women are trying to be anorexic. And today's version of Marilyn Monroe, let's just say, is Kim Kardashian. She makes girls say, you know what? I got big thighs. I got a big butt. I'm voluptuous. Guess what? I'm sexy. So I think that same way the bodybuilding brand has to sell certain factors. And let me give you an idea what I mean by certain factors. Whatever the scoring is, you get to change the comp. I run a sales organization. Whatever behavior I want, I can change it based on the structure of my comp plan. And comp plan is this behavior, I pay double the bonus. This behavior, I pay half the bonus. This behavior, I don't even pay you any bonus, right? Years ago, I manipulated my comp probably a few hundred times to figure out what produced the best behavior, right? And I would find out about 3 to 6 months. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're doing bad things. It's your fault. Your comp sucks. They're doing great things. Phenomenal job. That one thing we added, it produces better behavior. Now watch this. What if you create a golf score, whatever it is that these judges do, and they get together and they say, what is number one above all? What is number one above all? Okay, that we're going to give the highest level of scoring for. Maybe we are going to give better level of scoring and take a massive point off for the big belly. Okay, maybe we're going to take points off if I see any of the stuff, guys, synthol and any of the stuff that we use. You're just fully taking those numbers out, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if we find that there's some surgery where you put implants in, you're completely off because this is not what we're looking for. We want to see people that are, so then there's a certain structure that you put with the physique, and you can use technology nowadays to say which represents the most, you know, Greek god-esque, Larry Scott, Steve Reeves type of a physique, and we turn that into God. Versus what we have done, we've turned the Incredible Hulk into God. And Mr. Olympia people think they need to be 400 pounds, 350 off season to win. And I think that's part of the judging. I think that's part of how we're selling who is a perfect physique. And I don't think that's hard to do to change. I think it takes 2 to 5 years to do that. I don't think it's going to be a 6-month thing. I think it's 2 to 5 years, and it's based on who you recognize the most. And once they do that, like if I'm a girl and I want to look hot, and all of a sudden you start seeing all these girls get their lips done after Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie comes with flawless lips, and this lips start getting big for all these girls. And you're like, listen, that doesn't look pretty. That actually doesn't look pretty when you're doing it too much. So now it's come down because now the marketplace is saying those lips don't look attractive. I like a little bit more less. I don't want too much boob job, but we used to be big on boob jobs 10 years ago. Today, it's a little bit more, maybe not a double D, maybe a C. All of these things, the market is saying what's attractive, and it puts a lot of pressure. So again, I didn't give you one answer, but I give you a lot of answers there. I think if they take that approach, it's going to take work. I didn't say it's going to take 6 months. You're going to need lobbyists. You're going to need people campaigning. You're going to need attorneys. You're going to need all of that. But if you do that properly, within 2 to 5 years, this brand can be a whole different brand. Whole different brand if you do that.
See, I feel, I'm sure you're aware of what the classic physique division that was introduced in 2016, which has height and weight limits. And it does judge, it rewards the aesthetics and the shape and the small waist to a much higher degree than what we call now open bodybuilding, just used to be called bodybuilding. So I sort of felt when that division was created that, you know, these open guys, they're too big. We're never going to get them smaller again. The genie's out of the bottle. You can't stuff it back in. But I feel that classic physique was developed and introduced to try to bring that aesthetic look back. Because like you said, I remember as a kid, when I saw Arnold, I remember everyone looking at him and being, wow, he looks so good. And people would see Ronnie Coleman or Dorian at their biggest, or Big Ramy, and most people now would just be like, oh, that's disgusting. That's too extreme. You did a video not long ago, just a few days ago, about the Mr. Olympia contest, And, Joe Weider was the founder of that contest and the guiding force behind it for decades and decades. And unfortunately, Joe's no longer with us. We've had Robin Chang and now Dan Solomon. We have other people that have stepped in to keep the contest going and try to keep it, bring it into the new millennium and this and that. But what do you think? You must have some ideas on how could the Mr. Olympia, get better, get more mainstream appeal, just become something bigger than it is, because it's a cult sport. And I don't know if it's always destined to be a cult sport, or maybe it does have that potential to have much more mainstream appeal than it does. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, look, think about it this way. I'll explain it to you a very simple way, okay? And I know some of those guys, and I've had meetings with some of those guys, and I've had conversations. A lot of people have been reaching out and asking. I've been having a lot of private meetings about the bodybuilding world, respectful guys. I hear different arguments. It's doing better than it's ever done. It's dying out. So it's like Democrats and Republicans are going at it, and you kind of listening to the argument, right? Okay, let's set that aside. Let's set aside, we're winning. No, we're not. We're making money. We're not making money. And let's go to the basic thing, okay? So day one of 2015, when they started doing the presidential, 2016, when the presidential, Republican presidential debate started, you look at the stage, right? You're looking at the stage. There's a guy there named Jeb Bush, okay? Day one, he has $140 million raised. Day one, he has $140 million raised. Day one. Now you got Ben Carson, you got Marco Rubio, you got Ted Cruz, you got all these guys, right?
Yeah.
You got Huckabee, you got all these guys on stage. And then Trump shows up, okay? And Trump shows up and he looks around and he says, you guys may have more experience than me in politics. You do not have more experience than me in promoting, into rallying, and into steering the pot. You just don't. And watch what I'm going to light this place up. And he did. Day one, he went after the number one guy and he killed him. Day one. Low energy Jeb. Done. And everybody said, damn, he does have low energy. $140 million gone. Okay? That part's gone. Then one by one, he went after Rubio, Mark, he says, I've given so much money to all of you guys on this stage. He went through that, right? He becomes president. Now, some of you guys may not like him. Let me give you another one, okay? Barack Obama goes up against Hillary Clinton. He goes up against McCain. He goes up against Romney. He goes up against everybody. How did he win when he got up on stage? He knew how to rally. He knew how to get up and give a message. He knew how to get up on DNC, Democratic National Convention of 2004 as a one-term senator, gave a speech that everybody said, this guy's going to be president one day. And then boom, 4 years later, he's a president, two-term president, and history books are going to favor him. He's a young guy. He's going to live a good life because he's got the rest of his life to write books, do shows, go to every party, all this other stuff, right? He's living a great life right now. Go to Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton went up on stage and there was a debate and him and George Bush Sr. went at it. And Bill Clinton was from Arkansas. What is Arkansas? Most people couldn't even show where Arkansas is on the map. Now you got a guy that's got all these years, the director of CIA and a one-term president, George Bush Sr., who was the vice president for Reagan. He loses to a guy from Arkansas? Are you kidding me? Because Clinton knew how to speak and communicate his message. Now let's go to sports. Boxing is killing it. Killing it, boxing. I mean, people can say it's because of Holyfield, it's because of Duran, it's because of Sugar Ray Leonard, it's because of Tyson, it's because of all these guys. It's probably because of a guy named Don King, who knew how to promote it, okay? Very simple. Boxing today, no one cares about boxing today like they did 20 years ago. No one does. Boxing isn't what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The biggest promoter of boxing is a guy who's a boxer, because he himself sat there and says, you guys don't know how the hell to promote this stuff like Don King did. I'm going to do it myself. His name is what? Mayweather, right? Okay, so now watch this. I know you're not a sports guy. Now watch this. So people are watching boxing and they're saying, well, I just don't know about this boxing stuff. Maybe it's not good for your head because people are getting knocked out. And this is not good stuff because imagine all the health and all this other stuff. Then comes UFC, Pride, MMA, and these guys are kneeing people in the head. Now, what's better, a boxing glove hitting your face or a knee hitting your face? Right. They're bouncing heads off the ground, okay? How much criticism they get? This much. Why? Because Dana White knew how to argue every single argument they threw at him. He knew how to go through the politics of boxing in Vegas, and there is a lot of politics in Vegas. He knew how to go through the stuff through New York, LA, everybody. They fought them until today. People look forward to UFC fights more than they look forward to boxing fights. People don't trust the decision-making process and the judging in in boxing as much as they do in UFC. You knock somebody out, you know that guy's gone in UFC, right? And it's kicks to the head. It's bouncing off the ground. It's less healthy for you. It's definitely hurting a lot of these UFC guys, but they build a brand. So what's the moral of the story? Very simple. Trump, Obama, Clinton, Don King, Dana White, Joe Weider. What do they all have in common? They know how to deliver their message to the world. They know how to convert non-believers into believers. Trump converted non-believers into believers, okay? Obama converted non-believers into believers. Everybody's like, wait a minute, he's not going to become president. It's Hillary. It's going to be the first woman. It's history. It's this. Oh, it's McCain. He's got to do it. Look how much military. Oh, it's Romney. He's got business. Look at this. No. He knows how to convert non-believers. Bill Clinton knew how to convert non-believers. Don King knew how to convert non-believers. Dana White knows how to convert non-believers. And Joe Weider knows how to convert non-believers. And we're going to find out, the verdict's going to be out to see if whoever's running it today, they know how to convert non-believers. Because that's what it's really going to come down to. And how you do that is not as black and white as people think it is. You got to be loud. You got to be aggressive. You got to be making some noise. You got to make some enemies. You got to be able to handle these enemies. You got to stand up against these enemies. You can't be afraid of these enemies. You got to know they're going to play the dirtiest games, and you got to go with them. Someone's got to get up and say, look, what we're doing is special. No matter how much shit you talk about Mr. Olympia and bodybuilding, everybody goes to the gym. Everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to look better. Gym memberships blow up on January 1st because everybody wants to look good by July. That's our world. We just have to get better at telling the story. If they do that, Ron, again, if they do that with the promotional side like a Joe Weider did, if they do that and they tie money to it, because you said something, you said, Mr. Olympia, they changed it and they kind of brought this classic physique. Is that, would you consider like a Flex Lewis, a classic physique type of a winner, or what category would he be under?
He's 212. He's moving to open. So trying to think of I mean, it's a very new division, so the names aren't that big yet, but the current champion is Chris Bumstead. For two years prior to that was a guy named Breon Ansley. But, the emphasis is on a V-taper, a very small waist, very pretty shape. They liken it back to the days of like a Frank Zane or even the Arnold and Robbie Robinson and those very pretty physiques that we used to see that we stopped seeing once mass became the main criteria of judging.
Let me ask you a question. Watch this, Ron. Let me ask you a question. So how many of these guys that are winning the classics that have the small waist and a nice backs and a decent sized legs and nice shoulders, how many of them are getting modeling contracts and how many of them are getting sports fitness contracts and how many of them are doing movies right now?
There's one guy, Chris Bumstead, as a Gymshark. He's got a couple contracts, but aside from that, no, nobody.
But you know why I'm asking this? Let me explain to you why I'm asking this. So imagine you're running the brand and all of a sudden you're saying, hey, some of you guys that don't want to go for being 300 pounds or 275 on stage at 5'9", 5'10", guess what? Chris over here, who won the Classic, 6 weeks after he won, we got him a contract with Under Armour or Reebok or Adidas or whatever. And he's right now a face of this thing for natural, whatever it is. And he's doing movies, he's doing modeling, because if you got a small physique, if you got a small waist, you look good in a suit. You can do acting. You look like the Captain America guy from Avengers. There is places for you. So maybe I'm knowing that if I'm trying to brand this, maybe I'm teaching my bodybuilders who win. Like if I'm running Mr. Olympia, I'm teaching these guys to take a 4-week PR course. I'm teaching them acting. I'm putting them into basic acting classes. And I'm looking at the 5 ways of what direction I can take this guy next to, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's modeling, whether it's this. If the guy doesn't like the camera, maybe we're doing modeling. If the guy doesn't have the perfect blue eyes, whatever the face, maybe I'm going into act. So I'm taking that route with them. And it's my job to turn those guys into heroes. When I turn those guys into heroes, other people want me to do to them what I did to Chris. That's what I mean when I say how you build these guys up. If we do that, then if I'm a 16, I can say, you know what? I don't want to look 280. I like what that guy did. I'll take that guy's route. He won, he got a movie contract, he got an acting contract, he did modeling. Look at him now. And he got a nice 7-figure check, or he got a nice $500,000 check. And those types of opportunities are out there. It's very hard to find people with nice abs that look big and symmetrical, but they're not too big where movies don't want them to be in there. There's plenty of those opportunities out there if you market it well.
Yeah. And Dan Solomon, who runs the Olympia now, he was one of the producers for that Bigger. motion picture, the Joe Weider biopic. So certainly he's got to have some very strong connections to Hollywood and modeling agencies, casting agencies, things like that.
I like some of the things he's doing with when last year, some of the conflicts that took place. They brought Mark Wahlberg, and this year's an announcement with Shaq.
Yeah.
Especially the timing of it right now, and the storyline with Kobe and all of that. I like some of the things they're doing, but for me, Ron, all I think about is big, and I think about like being mainstream big, where everybody is following it and talking about it. That part has to be above and beyond creative, like in ways that's never been done before, to get people to say, damn, I want to be one of those guys. So I think they got a lot of opportunity to take it to a whole different level, and hopefully they'll do it.
Great. I have one final question for you. It's Olympia related. And because I think you're the perfect person to answer this, because you emigrated from Iran back in the Ayatollah Khomeini takeover days. Hadi Choopan took third place at the Olympia. He struggled for 2 years to get into the United States. I personally never thought it was going to happen. We had the travel bans and this and that. There's a widespread concern among the bodybuilding world. He's got millions of fans. Primarily it used to be in the Middle East, but especially once he came and won a couple shows, Canada he won, and then he did the Olympia, got third. He's a huge fan base now in the bodybuilding world, and there's a concern that he's not going to be allowed back here for the Mr. Olympia because of the current political situation between U.S. and Iran. So what do you think the odds are of Hadi getting some sort of special waiver or permission to return to the U.S. this September to compete?
So my answer would be the leadership team at Mr. Olympia needs to have the right contacts at the White House or in DC to be able to help that become a reality, okay? And there has to be a certain way to sell it, to know that Iran gets a lot of love, to know that a bodybuilder representing Iran has a shot at winning Mr. Olympia. That takes lobbying, that takes the idea of having some people on the inside, and that takes selling it to Iran for Iran to say, yes, we have one of the best bodybuilders in the world, because Iran likes that. You have to understand the motivation has to be from Iran's end. What matters to Iran? Iran loved it when they produced incredible wrestlers and they go to the Olympics and they would win. Iran loves it when they would send people and they would do fencing or they would do taekwondo. They've always been very good in taekwondo. I got some very good friends that are eight degree black belt who are instructors and who fought. So you have to look at it from Iran's perspective, and you have to look at it from contacts that you have at the White House in politics to help make that become a reality. But the part I will say about the guy, I watched his interview when he won. I don't know who interviewed him, but he had a translator with him, and they said, so what does it feel like to know that you won and you're the people's champion? You didn't win the whole thing, but you won the people's champion. What does it feel like for you? And his answer was fascinating when he said, for me, it means a lot to know that I won people's hearts, not a trophy, because a trophy is going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. But when you're in people's hearts, that lasts a lifetime. So he's the type of a guy in the brand that I want to lift up. I want to lift up because there's ties to politics and Iran and stories. These are the types of stories I want to make in the media. These are the opportunities I have for Mr. Olympia to be written about in Wall Street Journal, in New York Times, in LA Times, in New York Post, Washington Times, in a story like this. But again, you got to work on this one to be able to get it out there and get the right people behind them. And it's not hard to do, but it takes some work to be able to do those kinds of things.
Patrick, that was my interview. Yeah. With Hadi. We did that after right after he won. I think
he did two interviews. He did two interviews, and he said the same thing.
Yeah.
So it may have been one of them. It may have been you that did it, but he gave the same answer to two interviews. Yeah. But I mean, that tells you right there that you interviewed him. And when he said that to me, that resonates with me because, it's the heart. You want to see that, like, he's the kind of guy I can promote because he makes me feel like if I'm a guy somewhere, I'm like, man, I just connected to you emotionally. Sometimes these guys win and it's too cocky and I'm not like, I got him. I think he's a guy that Mr. Olympia's got to do more work with. And he just seems like the type of guy that's a company guy. A company guy, very hard to find. In sports, when you find company people, you got to do whatever you can to lift them up and win because they're going to produce more company people like he's a company guy.
Yeah, I sincerely hope he's allowed to come back because I waited a long time to see that man in person, and he was fantastic. He was one of the greatest physiques I've seen in many, many years, and I really hope he gets back in He belongs in the Olympia. He absolutely belongs there, fighting for the title every year. Patrick, you've been so gracious with your time today. I appreciate it very, very much. Man, I could have talked to you for another hour. But I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already checked out the channel, you probably have, but Valuetainment, just priceless nuggets of wisdom on there, all kinds of things. You could watch the interviews, you can watch motivational things. Gee, put it on during your cardio, guys. You will not be you'll be happy that you did. Also, the Instagram is Patrick Bet David. Website is patrickbetdavid.com. You got all that good stuff. And that's it. I thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Patrick. Very, very
Ron,
appreciative.
I want to give you some love because what you do is very important to the game. Very, very important to the game. Sometimes, you know, when you're building up a brand that you believe in and it's very obvious you're a true believer, you're not just doing this because you want to be a millionaire. You actually believe in this world. You actually believe in what you're doing. You're a product of the product. It takes a lot of voices like you to get the message out. I think there's like 2 or 3 YouTube channels that are doing a great job. There's a lot of them, but there's some of them that are doing a good job talking about the right things. You're one of them. There's a couple of them out there. I just want to tell you and encourage you, man, even though you may be creating content thinking, is this really doing anything that's going to make an impact for it? The right people hear it. Big things could happen. There's a lot of people around the world that are being inspired by the content you're creating. So keep it up. Great stuff you're doing there.
Thank you very much. Well, everybody, thank you for watching the Ronline Report with Patrick Bet David. We'll see you next time.